Hello, 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 dear developers, dear web developers. Some of you are web developers. I hope that some of you in this room are web front-end developers. Maybe this session will be the most interesting for that category of people who build apps, but I'll try to make it interesting and relevant for everyone, because after all, we are all users of web applications. And disclaimer, by saying web application, in 99% of the cases today, during my session, I mean web front-end part of the app. Let's talk about how to provide, how to build proper offline experience. And let's start from switching slides first, right? Sorry, something went a bit wrong. Next try. Yay! Yeah, first of all, let's try to understand what constructs proper offline experience for our application. And then I promise that you can start building it right here, maybe, okay, not right here, not right now, but at least tonight after this day of DevOps. About myself, Maxim Salnikov. I came to you from Oslo, Norway, and I do lots of speaking, training, writing about web platform and cloud. And I'm huge fan of developer community conferences like DevOps. Let's stay connected. This is my Twitter handle, and I tweet mainly about web platform, mainly about progressive web applications. So that might be useful for you to follow me if you wish to get updated, if you wish to follow the latest and greatest things. And there are many things happening. And daytime I work in Microsoft. I make sure that all developers who use Azure are happy. As simple as that. Before we dive into the details of offline, I just want to say a few nice words about web as a platform for the applications. Because web was not invented like a platform, it was more than 30 years ago. But what do we have now? First of all, browsers, or like major main browsers, are evergreen. Of course, it makes our lives as developers much simpler. Versatile language, and maybe this statement is no longer correct, because with rise of WebAssembly, we have not only JavaScript as the single natively supported language in the browser. No, now we have a bunch of them. Not even saying about many interesting programming languages that you can use to build your application and transpile it to JavaScript later. By the way, I have some TypeScript stickers here available. JS engines, that's what browser vendors do for us. I cannot complain about them, and every next version of engine where we actually run our code is better and better and more optimized. Tooling is the best in class. This is my personal opinion. I hope you agree with me that IDEs, IntelliSense, all bunch of libraries, frameworks, everything is just best in class for web development, and maybe, to be more precise, web front-end development. And all of us, huge community. I believe it's around 20+ million of people who say that they do something for web dev. But let's stay objective. And of course, there are some issues, and one of them is, again, related to historical reasons. Web is very dependent on being online, on being always connected. And by the way, I stream these slides from online, and I will post the link to the slide deck right after my session, so follow me on Twitter. Let's then dedicate the rest of the session to, first of all, understanding how to deal with this problem, how to mitigate this historical challenge, and we start from understanding what do we exactly mean by proper offline ready, or if you wish, offline first web application. First of all, the app itself should be always available. This experience is no different from the one we have for native applications, for example, native mobile ones. Once we installed something from App Store, Google Play, any store, we always make sure that at least the app itself will start. This is completely different for, let's say, classical browser experience, right? Even if some pages, some resources might be somewhere in HTTP cache on our local device, or here we say, so we put head of our users, our application on user devices, it's somewhere there. But if they open mysuperwebsite.com, still nothing, right? Still offline dyno, so something that's not fully controllable, was not fully controllable. Then, I believe 99% of the web applications consume some data during runtime. Calls to APIs, CDNs, this ping pong is always going on during runtime of the app. And of course, that's a really good idea to have full control over what do we do with this data, JSON, XML, or images, or whatever. And do we have full control over this caching and reusing as developers? More interesting use case when, for whatever reason, are we on the plane or somewhere in the tunnel, we are offline. And maybe the most even more challenging situation is when it's so-called Li-Fi. We are kind of connected, but in reality not. Still, users can perform some actions. They can even create some data during this challenging times of your applications. And it's the question, are we as developers ready to provide great user experience to carefully preserve this data and even more interesting, automatically propagate this data to our servers if it was about trying to submit something back to our APIs? And more generally, connection failures happen constantly, and actually being always online, this is something ideal, unreachable situation, right? It's a kind of a privilege. So we have to keep in mind that internet can come and go. And again, a question to us developers, is our code ready for all these situations? And do we have proper tools and APIs to somehow mitigate this? Talking about updates of the application and also data it consumes. Again, the experience is well known. I believe all major mobile platforms offer this background update of the application, so you no longer need to go to a store and check the version if it's latest or not. No, everything happens in the background, and users get to this, right? So why not to provide similar experience for web front-end apps? Of course, with all considerations on resources usage. Definitely, it's not about every minute pulling something in the background just to check if you deployed new index HTML. No, we have to find the balance, and I believe we found this. People who create corresponding specifications and standards. And after all, with all this in mind, web is a great platform, you remember, right? And this platform equipped with tons of interesting features, somehow like satellites of this offline experience, access to hardware, access to native parts of operating system. We definitely want to still use this in our application. So we want to keep soul, we want to keep nature of web while we build offline application. Well, time to introduce way to build offline ready applications. Of course, this is all about progressive web applications. This kind of maybe a bit marketing-ish term that was invented over 7 years ago. So just imagine, folks, PWA is 7 years old concept. Are we still familiar enough with possibilities it gives to us, to developers. From my experience, not everyone, far not everyone, and the goal of my session is to remove all possible fears of using this technology and give you some interesting tooling. You might ask me, Maxim, is PWA a thing in 2022? So you say it's like 7 years old, and is there some adoption in the wild world, in the real world of web development? I'd say yes, and I have privilege to participate in a project called Web Almanac by organization called HTTP Archive, where we actually every year run some large queries and define snapshot of the web, if you wish, and numbers clearly show that, adoption of progressive web applications and service workers in particular is growing. Maybe not huge percentage, right? So like almost 4 for mobile and 4 something for desktop. At the same time, service workers serve around 1/5 of overall traffic. Of course, Web Almanac is not scanning all possible URL addresses. There is a sample of, if I remember correctly, around 7 million of addresses, quite representative. So we can at least approximately think about, this is level of popularity. Talking about some, let's say, software vendors that build commercial products, services, and here is Microsoft employee, I want to show a couple of things that are related to Microsoft, besides all things that are directly related to the Microsoft Edge browser, where PWA functions are evolving in very, very fast pace. No, just commercial products. Power Platform, this is no-code, low-code environment. It's not very visible on this picture, but there is just a simple checkbox: make your Power App progressive. And magically it becomes installable, it becomes offline ready. Also, we have this online offering of Office tools, Microsoft 365, and all latest products from there. Also, I apologize for such a small text, but it says that like the data you enter for Microsoft lists, it's like one of the latest products in M365 family. Everything you've done offline will be carefully saved and automatically propagated to the servers. Just a couple of examples. Now, back to a bit more technical part of the session. As I promised, I will give you some ideas and introduce one tool for you to start converting your classical web front-end application to offline ready one. I'm not saying progressive because it's one of the ideas of progressive in definition is the fact that you can add features progressively, right? So you don't have to create you don't have to add all possible features of super duper PWA to your app immediately. No, just improve it one by one. And of course, the second part of the definition, progressive, is about progressive enhancement. Let's start from the first point. If you remember the list of what constructs offline-ready application. Application UI itself. Maybe now it's very popular to create single-page applications, so I will use this concept as example, but I believe it's equally relevant to multi-page applications as well. Maybe SPA is just a lowest hanging fruit, and maybe it gives more visible results to all these kinds of optimization. So there is a concept called application shell, and basically that means application itself. Everything except data it downloads during runtime. In technical words, this is most likely your index.html, most likely your JavaScript bundle, CSS bundle, maybe some core graphics like logotypes and icons. So how to make this offline ready? immediately after users downloaded this for the very first time. By saying downloaded, I mean just literally opened your web address. Well, first of all, we have to understand what exactly constructs this application shell. I already mentioned all this possible set of resources. Then, no magic. If you want to serve it offline, we have to store it somewhere, right? And now in all evergreen browsers, we have special storage. Special storage without special name. It's just called cache storage, as simple as that. So we have to find a way to put all these resources into cache. Maybe completely in the background. I mean, we don't have to bother user by any kind of requests. Do we want to do this or like informing? It's up to you, but mainly this all happens in the background, completely transparent for the users. And then when time comes, we can store it from the cache. And the interesting thing is it's not only for offline usage. If there's a set of your application resources, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, whatever, and it's on the local device of your current user, why not to serve it from there all the time? Because why ever do this round trip to the network? But of course, we keep in mind that we update our application from time to time. I'll explain this a bit later. Manage versions. We definitely don't want to always serve very first cached version. No chance for us to do this. No secret at all that for the last 3 points, we have service worker for the win. Service worker API to be precise. This session is not getting started with service worker, so do not expect any kind of deep dive into this quite extensive and maybe not the most trivial API in very big picture. After all, what is service worker? This is JavaScript code in form of one file or multiple files. There is some ways to import modules, and it's from family of web workers, a very specific one because it's event driven. So all the payload we have in our service worker is a reaction on this or that event. And talking about logical construction, service worker could be presented as a gateway between your application and all outer world. And it's not only about internet, because events can come to service worker both from your application and from browser, proxied from operating system, and even from internet. Here we talk about push notifications. So how we react on these events, what kind of code we write as a response to these events, actually construct service worker functionality, and actually this is how we carefully build offline experience. In theory, service worker is an event-driven worker, and you have a bunch of events to listen to in the service worker after it's registered and controls your page. And put corresponding code inside there. So on event call install, we put resources we need into cache. Maybe we need to fetch these resources first. On event called activate, it's best time to manage versions, to understand, was it like newer version? Maybe we want to clean up after ourselves and wipe previous version and put the new files in the cache. Of course, we have to find a way to understand, was it updated or not? And here we have to apply some, I don't know, some smart algorithms. And of course, it's all about fetch resources again. And then event called fetch that intercepts all outgoing requests from let's call it client-side part of your application hosted, like running on your users' devices. By saying all, I mean, first of all explicit requests like fetch XML HTTP request you have in your JavaScript code. Some implicit requests like when you have image in your HTML markup or any other resource linked there. And all navigation requests when users either surf your application from section to section or just type in address manually. So all these events carefully can be intercepted in this listener. So this in theory, and you'll find lots of articles about service worker 101, and after all, you'll end up with a file around 100 lines long, and I intentionally keep this unreadable. This is just to show you like the volume of the service worker for, let's say, hello world scenario. And in this scenario, you will miss lots of things that are relevant both for user experience and for running your application smoothly, and mainly for developer experience, right? We as developers want to also get some satisfaction and have some fun while we build and especially debug these applications. And in production, that might be even more interesting because many things can go wrong. This is one of my favorite slides. I call this scary slide. Kind of few of the things you have to care about, you have to think about before pushing your service worker to production. And it's not a full list, of course. Still, you can get a call in the night from your client, customer, visitor saying, why do I see like old version of the application? You promised to deploy a new one. And it's not worst case scenario. In worst case scenario, you'll get a call like, why do I see blank page and console log full of red lines? What's going on? You promised me PWA will improve my app, but it's completely destroyed this. Well, after one or two cases like this, you will better understand a joke from 2019 that is still relevant. We will not go into the details of why Service Worker API is so conservative, like by its nature, why it's so challenging to kick out the old, like the wrong version of Service Worker if you deployed it, and to replace it with the new one. Well, it's like just unneeded technical details for us. The fact is, 1/3 of all service workers you'll find in the wild on current snapshot of internet created by one library called Workbox. This library is kind of industry standard these days. I cannot say I'm super happy with the fact that there are no serious competitors to Workbox. I'm super happy with the library itself, but again, to stimulate development, we need some serious alternative way. But now, like, it's almost de facto standard. And there are lots of interesting advantages that are in Workbox. And of course, it's open source, it's free, and dev team is amazing. They are always open for your pull requests. They are very responsive on your comments. Feel free to create issues. Yeah, this is classical open source product, mainly driven by web advocacy team of Google. But yeah, like any open source, there are many different contributors from many different companies. Well, so how will this look in if we decide to use Workbox? How will this 100 lines of Hello World Service Worker will look like? Well, this will be a couple of lines for the basic offline-ready experience, for what we call offline-ready application shell. You import one method and you use one method, and its name says for itself pre-cache and route. That means that when it happens, this will fetch resources that construct your application shell and will set up routing. So your service worker will respond from resources from users' cache, from this cache storage that exists in all browsers these days. And in addition, this will also manage versions. So Workbox will check if new version was available, and if yes, it carefully will fetch, and then you as developer have to choose. Do you want to inform your user about new version is available or not? But let's talk a bit later about that flow. Well, it's a couple of lines. in your service worker. And yeah, really good fact that you don't have to create service worker like completely separately. You just take your existing service worker and extend it by a workbox functionality. So it's not all or nothing concept. It's just extend your service worker concept. What's left here? Well, we have to give workbox some knowledge about our app, because library itself completely doesn't understand if this resource, if this HTML file, if this CSS file part of your application shell, or there is no need to pre-cache it right here, right now. So we have to populate this. Actually, it's placeholder, the only obligatory parameter here, WB manifest. This strange name is intentionally strange because we have to replace this by actual information about our application before deployment of this service worker. And of course, that totally makes sense to do it on every application build, because set of resources is different and files are different themselves. This manifest should contain also some hash sum to help workbox to understand if the version updated or not. Well, let's start with very practical steps. I don't ask you to pull out laptops. Let's do this in our imagination, and you can repeat all these steps tonight at home. Let's install a module called workbox build, and as name says, this is for build time. This is not something that we will use not something that we will deploy or something that we will use during runtime. No, it's just a helper for us to populate this placeholder variable. And like in many cases, we want to just automate it. So let's create build script for us to actually build service worker before its deployment. And workbox build module is all about that. By providing simple points of configuration, like source service worker, like then the destination, and patterns to explain workbox what actually constructs our application shell. It's super flexible. I promise that you'll find the globe patterns that works for your even very complex architectured web frontend part. And then you call one method called inject manifest that does this relatively simple trick. It iterates through these patterns. It injects all corresponding resources and their hash sums. And well, it's almost ready service worker, almost, because imports are not working. ES6 imports are not working in service workers yet in the modern browsers, and maybe no intention to deploy this even if they work, because we really want to bundle this first. When we bundle everything using your favorite bundler, so it's not different from your main application, your service worker will look like this. Completely unreadable for us humans, minimized, uglified, and optimized for the deployment. And maybe the last step in this build flow will be just inject this build script as a last step. This is very important because it works with ready for deployment piece of your application. And then again, use your favorite bundler to bundle both your application and service worker. And very, very final step in this flow is registering service worker in the application. I will not focus too much on that. It deserves a separate session. But I can say that Workbox has also helper for this scenario called Workbox window module. It's just a syntax sugar, and it provides some nice hooks for us developers to jump in to organize experience like this. As I already mentioned, you always have a choice as a developer, and just imagine that you as user of your application opened website with the app. Okay, in the background it was downloaded, and like all resources that from app shell were fetched and pre-cached. Okay, that works fine, and now this user will be delighted by immediate starting up the application because it goes from local cache, and it will work even without internet, even more exciting. But what if you deployed new version 2? What's then? Well, now it's a slightly strange situation, right? You have version 1 in local cache of your like millions of your users, and version 2 on your server. And of course, Workbox, thanks to providing this hash sums during build flow, knows about new version is available, but still, by default, it serves immediately version number 1. And after a couple of seconds, after like doing network trip, there is information about new version. You as developers decide, is this good idea to maybe interrupt user experience in the worst case scenario, or just inform by some subtle pop-up or like toast or whatever? Or you can just ignore this, because on the next load, this second version, which was carefully downloaded and stored in the cache just a few seconds or milliseconds later after rendering version 1, version 2 will take control. If the change is not that critical, maybe it's a good idea for you to just ignore that fact, not to scare users. I'm sure that you have seen a message like this on websites you visit, and it might be confusing, especially for like regular users who don't care about any kind of web technology, service workers, or whatever. They don't understand. They opened some address and it says after 1 second that new version is available. Why not to serve a new version? Because this version you see was loaded from your local cache, but up to you. There is no one-size-fits-all strategy. Okay, that was about application shell. What about a few more points from our very, very initial list? What about carefully storing and smartly using data that our application loads, downloads, fetches, you name it, during runtime? Runtime application data. Well, if we go back to our handmade service worker scenario, here we actively use an event called fetch. And in the service worker I've seen in the wild, including the ones generated by Workbox, of course, this event, fetch, contains maybe, I don't know, 80% of overall code of the service worker, because this is exactly where all magic happens. All this magic with fetching, caching, providing fallbacks for fallbacks, and many other things happen, all, of course, in the name of great user experience. So in this very super naive implementation, and definitely it's not even hello world, it's just hello. We have to go through every kind of requests, and compared to application shell caching and serving scenario, there is no one-size-fits-all for runtime data, and your desired caching strategy could be very different from resource to resource. For example, something that you fetch from CDNs, completely different, let's say, life cycle from something you fetch from APIs. And even in your API, the types of the data could be very different in terms of how fresh, in terms of, let's say, the compromise between freshness and performance, right? So you have to go through all these URLs. After all, you will end up with your own mini router, and not even saying about implementing all these strategies. So here we can use start using word strategy actively, because for example, what is network first? This is when for every intercepted request that goes to /API/breaking news, in our service worker, we write the code that goes to this network address and tries to fetch, let's say, JSON from this address. If the network is available, that's okay. Not okay, but it's great. It's the best case scenario. So we fetch this JSON. We, of course, give it back to the application. And, of course, it's very smart to store this JSON for the next use. And next use could be, for example, when network is not available. What's then? Our fetch request will fail, but okay, in this case, it's not a disaster for us because we have something in the cache from the previous visit, right? So maybe this will not be freshest option data, but still something. And we also can inform user that unfortunately network is not available or server is not available. This is why you see breaking news that are not that breaking, right? Maybe they are 1 minute long. We have all the tools to inform. And for some archive information, I don't know, archive of news from 80s, maybe no even reason to go to network first. We can check if this concrete user on this concrete device already downloaded breaking news from 1862, and definitely why to ever go to network again? We can always serve this from local cache. But of course, if it's not there, yeah, we go to network, we fetch this resource if network is available, we serve this to application, and at the same time, we put everything to the cache. I briefly explained to you a couple of strategies. There are many more strategies, and of course, I tried to provide some of the fallbacks, but even this explanation took a few minutes, right? And you have to implement, test, debug everything manually. That's a very interesting exercise, a very interesting dev task, but maybe it will take a bit more time than you expect. Can Workbox help in this situation? Yes, with returning declarativeness to all this flow. So if you go back and you see that this will be very imperative code. You literally say, you explain to the browser what the next step will be, right? With Workbox, we explain behavior. We do not order to do something. We explain how we see this, how we want this to work. It all starts with a few more imports. I want to emphasize how flexible Workbox modular structure. And then we operate routes. We provide some template, and of course, in case of runtime data, we cannot survive without template routes, right? So we don't have privilege to list all possible API endpoints. No, it's always some regex or some other ways to extract URL unit. You will see one more option on the next slide. And then you just say that all URLs that fetched from this pattern, from this template, should just use cache-first strategy. And cache-first strategy itself was carefully implemented for us by developers of the Workbox. And other strategies. So this one is the most conservative strategy, right? This is for avatars, and once they download it, at least at gravatar.com, they will never change at all. If you upload new avatar, this will have next different URL address, right? So we can always try cache first without any worry that we'll serve outdated avatar. This will not happen even with this conservative strategy, which could be very different. For example, for list of something, list of articles, like on my example, or list of products that more or less dynamic. So in that case, we might want to ask Workbox to leverage network first strategy when we try our luck with network every single time. Well, that's the most obvious strategy for that case. For other scenarios, we can go for some more sophisticated things like strategy called stale while revalidate. This is the combination of the best. So first of all, it immediately tries to serve this data, this, let's say, JSON with article from cache storage, if it's there. And even if it's there, it it doesn't stop at that time point like cache-first strategy. It still goes and tries to fetch this resource from network, and then compares this, and if it's different, it updates what we have in the storage. So this is kind of mixed between cache first and network first. Maybe for concrete article or concrete product, this is the best. It's something that might change, but not that often. So it's not a big deal if you serve, let's say, previous version. But even in that case, using another feature of Workbox plugins system, you still can inform user that, okay, this data you see that appeared immediately on your screen. So we hope that you were like surprised by speed of rendering, because it came from your local cache. But now we know that there is new version available, and we can send this message to our main application. And then it's up to you. You can again provide some toast or dialogue or whatever with asking, do you want to, for example, reload this content or reload page itself? Again, up to concrete scenario. Saying about strategies and plugins, there are a bunch of them available out of the box in the Workbox. Out of the box in the Workbox, nice. Not even saying that it's very developer friendly for creating our own strategies and our own plugins. All possible tools, hooks are ready for us to jump in, to plug in, to provide a slightly customized functionality. Okay, a bit more briefly about keeping application fresh, and maybe even more important, automatically propagate data that users created while they were offline, or we can call this sync. So it's synchronization when application go back to online state. So what kind of APIs do we have for this universe? Well, we have background sync and we have periodic background sync. Very similar names, but very different functionalities that we can build using these APIs. And of course, level of availability of these APIs in the browsers is slightly different. And I intentionally do not say during my session what's supported in which browser, for which platform, in which version. First of all, this is a progressive enhancement. If something is not supported, you just make sure that you properly wrapped this code in feature detection. So at least core functionality of your application will not suffer from this. And second, it's evolving. So a new version of either Chromium or WebKit engines might be deployed while I speak. So I will just give you outdated information. So this is why let's keep this this discussion separate from the session. So what's this all about? Background sync. It's about one-time synchronization. One-time synchronization of data you want to synchronize. It just gives you proper time to plug in your functionality. And this time is when application is online. While periodic background sync, according its name, is about something, some cadence of, again, some hooks or more proper word, events for us. What kind of code will be will we create in this event listener? Up to us. If it might be some try to update application itself, or maybe, for example, if we build a web-based Twitter application, maybe we want to update its feed in the background, so when users open the application, they are, wow, surprised by immediate displaying latest version of the feed without any kind of loaders. What unites all these synchronization thinks that thanks to magic of service worker, or magic is not a word we developers love, right? Thanks to life cycle of the service worker, it all will happen. All these events will come to your service worker even when the main application is closed, when the tab with your application doesn't exist. Furthermore, when the browser is closed. But here is like a small disclaimer. Of course, when we say browser is closed, it's a bit tricky because all modern browsers, they pretend to be closed, right? But in reality, they keep some background processes running. Of course, if you wish, you can go to settings and find this well-hidden feature to disable this completely. But let's say for the regular users, when they hit close, this cross button or red button on Mac, in reality, browser remains in the memory. That means all your service workers and the service workers from all the developers are on duty. A bit scary, right? So you can open your browser and actually see how many service workers you have on current device. I promise, if you're like regular web user, there will be hundreds of service workers that are on your machine, and they are always on duty. Super briefly about scenario on background synchronization, because this is maybe the most critical for providing proper offline user experience. Just imagine, let's go back to example of web front-end based Twitter application. And I'm active user of Twitter, I tweet here and there, and once I was offline, I decided to send some tweet, and well, in let's say classical web application, we'll see some errors or page not found or server not found, something like this. And in best case scenario, developers can somehow preserve this data, right? So, but it's not about any kind of automation that like, hey, Maxim, no worries, this data will be sent to servers automatically right after connection was restored. So you just can close your application browser, and yeah, this will happen automatically. How can we implement this using background sync API? Well, without Workbox, that's absolutely possible, of course, but will require some work from your side and some knowledge of, let's say, at least IndexedDB API, which is the lowest hanging fruit for storing all kinds of data, which is maybe a bit more complex than JSON, if it's needed for you. So what do? We change how the forms work. So instead of just using fetch, like this straightforward fetch, we re-architect our like mindset, and now we think about when users hit send, post, whatever, it's synchronization, and if we are online, this synchronization happens immediately, and if we are offline, we have to postpone this synchronization, but we have to implement everything. And as you see on this, it's very silly example, no any kind of feature detection and simplified as much as possible. You have to post, you have to save the data, let's say message you wanted to send. Save post method is for this, like imaginary method where you most likely will use IndexedDB. And then you register this sync in terms of background sync API, and then in our naive handmade service worker, we listen to this sync event, and actually we can have multiple syncs for multiple pieces of functionality of the application, and this is why giving name is a very good idea, and I see error on my in my code, like different naming notations for post tweet here and there. This is just my last minute change of the slide. I have to definitely make it consistent. Anyway, we listen to this sync called post tweet, and we extract data from IndexedDB. If there are multiple tweets, we have to iterate, and we have to do these fetches one after another, and maybe then we want to provide fallbacks for if something goes wrong in that case. Quite demanding in terms of line of code, in terms of works. How Workbox can help here? There's another plugin called background sync, and there is actually only one parameter we have to pass, called max retention time, like how long do we want to try. And then we used absolutely the same approach as we use for caching runtime data. We register route, and we know, okay, this form wants to post to this API, and we just use this plugin. And the only change here is, you see, parameter number 3. It's optional, but here I use it explicitly by saying, do this only for post requests, which makes sense if I want to post the data. So it simplifies our life again, and provides this quite important experience for application if we want to call this application offline ready. There are many more APIs from the same universe, from the idea how to make offline experience of our users better. And you can have access to local file system, you can have access to address books. Of course, there are like different implementations for different platforms, but API is universal, so you don't care if it's on iOS or Android. And some other APIs, actually, over 100 of APIs are either ready or in testing mode. So it's all part of a project called Fugu. Time to sum up. We have 1 minute left. Web platform today. Full-fledged place for building, running, hosting, testing, debugging, any kinds of applications. All offline ready mechanism. So basically everything what I presented here is at least available in Chromium engine, and at least application shell and runtime caching is also available on pretty much all modern devices, including iPhones. Awesome tools for you like Workbox, and let's keep in mind user experience. What I love the most, this is just the beginning of amazing story of progressive web applications. If you wish to follow all the details of what I presented, there is GitHub repo, and links to documentation, and links to my Twitter and LinkedIn. Again, you'll find everything on that page. So please take your mobile devices, scan this QR code, and you'll get all the information. And of course, let's stay connected. So I see, yes, if you scanned this, then I can put my last slide to say thank you very much. I'm very, yeah.